Imagine working at the same place for decades,
Yeah.
maybe even your whole life, and then suddenly the doors are closed.
Yeah.
That's the reality
Okay.
for over 1,500 workers at a tire factory
Right.
in Tonawanda, New York,
Wow.
a plant that's been around for over a century. We're talking about the Sumitomo rubber factory.
Right.
And we dug into a couple of recent news articles
Okay.
detailing this closure, and, well, there's a lot to unpack here.
It's a big one for sure. A lot of people impacted by this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The Sumitomo factory, once part of the, really iconic Dunlop Tires brand,
Yeah. Dunlop.
abruptly closed its doors,
Yeah.
leaving 1,550 employees in a really tough spot.
Mhm.
And what makes this even more, kind of shocking is that it seemed to come out of nowhere.
Yeah. No warning.
No early warnings, no hints of trouble, just boom,
Shut down.
shut down. Yeah.
Yeah, and that lack of communication, just really adds insult to injury, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's already a difficult situation, but to not have any kind of heads up
Right.
makes it even harder to deal with. And from what the articles say, Sumitomo is, saying the closure is due to the factory's underperformance
Okay.
and just the really competitive tire market.
Yeah. But here's where it gets a little, I don't know, a little strange.
Marky, yeah.
Sumitomo claims they invested $140 million in modernizing this Tonawanda plant
Yeah.
in recent years.
Recent years.
So if it was struggling that much, why such a significant investment?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the articles didn't really get into the specifics of, what those investments were. So it's hard to say if it was really, enough to make a difference,
Right.
or if there were other things going on behind the scenes. Sumitomo also said that they tried to find a buyer for the factory,
Okay.
but nobody was interested.
Interesting.
So ultimately, they decided to just shift production to their other plants around the world.
Which, of course, begs the question.
Yeah.
Why are those other plants more attractive? Is it cheaper labor, or is there some sort of bigger strategic shift happening within Sumitomo?
It's definitely worth thinking about, especially considering how global Sumitomo is.
Right.
The articles didn't really delve into their, international operations, but it's probably safe to assume that things like labor costs,
Yeah.
proximity to resources, maybe even government incentives in other countries
Right.
could be playing a role in their decision.
So before we go deeper into, those global dynamics, I think it's kind of fascinating to take a step back and look at Dunlop's journey.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about a company that started as a small Irish startup way back in 1888.
That's right, 1888.
Can you believe that?
That's a long time ago.
I find it incredible that a company with, such humble beginnings could become this global brand.
Right, household name.
Synonymous with tires.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody knows Dunlop.
how did that even happen?
Well, it's really a story of smart moves.
Okay.
Over the years, Dunlop went through mergers, acquisitions, even a really complicated joint venture with Goodyear.
Oh, wow.
It just shows how adaptable the company was and how good they were at navigating, the ever-changing tire industry.
So today, different companies actually manage the Dunlop brand in different parts of the world.
Yeah, that's right. It's a perfect example of how interconnected and complex the global market has become,
Right.
especially in industries like tire manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a tangled web for sure.
It is.
But bringing you back to the situation in Tonawanda, it's hard not to see this closure as part of a bigger kind of unsettling trend.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. The articles mentioned other big companies like Michelin, Stellantis, even Pepsi doing similar things.
Really, Pepsi?
Yeah, even Pepsi cutting jobs, closing factories.
Wow.
It's not a very good sign for the future of American manufacturing.
And for the communities like Tonawanda,
Mm-hmm.
whose livelihoods are so tied to these industries,
Absolutely.
it makes you wonder what happens to a town that's built around a factory when that factory just vanishes.
Right, where do they go from here?
Yeah. It's a tough question.
It is.
But, from what we see in the articles, the people of Tonawanda, they're showing incredible resilience.
That's encouraging.
They're not giving up.
Yeah.
They're actively looking for new opportunities and supporting each other
Yeah.
through this really difficult time.
It's good to hear that they're not just, throwing in the towel.
Right.
That they're fighting back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trying to make the best of a bad situation.
And it reminds me of something we discussed recently, those Science of Getting Rich podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Those are great.
Yeah, they really emphasize that even in the midst of setbacks like job loss,
Right.
there's potential for growth and even wealth creation.
Absolutely. That's all about mindset. Yeah, looking for new avenues.
Exactly. Maybe this could be a catalyst for some of those workers to pursue entirely new paths that they might not have considered otherwise.
Yeah, turn that negative into a positive.
Exactly. Turn that unemployment struggle into an opportunity to reinvent yourself.
I love that. And, Tonawanda, with that spirit, they have that determination.
Yeah.
They might just be an example of how a community can bounce back from something like this and come back even stronger.
That's a great point. I'm hopeful for them.
Me too. It's easy to get lost in the big picture of it all, the economic trends and the global forces at play.
Right.
But I think it's really important to remember the human side of this story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Behind those 1,550 JAGs lost, there are real people whose lives have been turned upside down.
Exactly. We've talked about the numbers, but what about the faces?
Right?
The personal stories of the people who dedicated themselves to this factory.
For a lot of them, it was more than just a job.
Yeah.
The articles talked about how the Sumitomo plant was a source of pride for the workers, a place where they could use their skills and build something they believed in. Right. It was part of their identity.
And for some families, it was a multi-generational thing,
Yeah.
Imagine working alongside your parents, maybe even your grandparents.
Wow.
Carrying on that family tradition, and then suddenly it's all gone.
Yeah, that connection to the past, that sense of continuity.
Right.
Just ripped away.
It's a huge loss that goes way beyond just a paycheck.
Absolutely.
And you see in the articles, the workers are worried about how they're going to pay their bills.
Right.
Support their families. Some might even have to move.
Yeah.
Uproot their lives.
Yeah.
Leave behind their support systems. It's a lot to deal with.
It's a lot.
One worker was quoted in one of the articles saying he just wished he could sleep through this nightmare until 2030.
Oh, wow.
It really stuck with me.
Yeah.
It just speaks to that deep sense of despair and uncertainty that so many are feeling.
Absolutely. And beyond the financial burden,
Yeah.
there's the emotional and psychological toll.
Right. Losing a job can be a real blow to your self-esteem, your sense of purpose.
Exactly. It's like a part of you is missing.
Especially for those who gave years or even decades to this factory.
Right. Their whole working lives.
The articles did mention that there are support systems being put in place.
Okay, good.
Job fairs, training programs offered by local organizations and the state.
Yeah.
But are those really enough to address the scale of this crisis?
That's a good question. I mean, they're a step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say if it'll be enough in the long run.
And I can't help but think about the long-term impact on Tonawanda as a whole.
Right.
The ripple effects on the entire community.
Absolutely. When a major employer like that shuts down,
yeah,
it can send shockwaves through the whole local economy.
Think about it. Local businesses suffer because people have less money to spend.
Right.
Property values might go down.
Yeah.
There's this sense of fear, this uncertainty that can just permeate everything.
Yeah, it can really erode the fabric of the community.
Yeah.
Potentially leading to even bigger problems down the road.
It's a scary thought, honestly.
It is.
But amidst all this, I keep coming back to the resilience of the people in Tonawanda. They're not giving up.
That's the spirit.
And the articles highlight that determination.
Yeah.
That spirit of community that's shining through in this tough time.
Absolutely. We see local officials working tirelessly to provide support.
Right.
Organizations like Workforce Buffalo stepping up to connect workers with new opportunities.
And even the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority is interviewing laid-off workers.
Wow.
For open positions. It's really amazing to see the community coming together to help its own.
It's a powerful reminder that even when things are tough, people come together to find solutions.
Yeah.
It's about leveraging that collective strength to create a way forward.
It really seems like the people of Tonawanda are embodying that old saying, it takes a village.
Yeah.
They're coming together to lift each other up and navigate this challenging transition.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most important things we can take away from this whole situation.
Yeah.
The power of community, that willingness to support one another.
Right.
It can make a real difference.
So we've explored the immediate impact on people's lives
and
the bigger challenges facing Tonawanda.
Right.
But I'm curious to look ahead. What does the future hold for this community?
Yeah.
For American manufacturing as a whole?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And while we can't predict the future for sure,
right,
I think there are reasons to be hopeful.
Okay.
We'll dive into those potential paths to recovery and, a new beginning in the last part of our deep dive.
We've gone through the initial shock of that Sumitomo factory closure and explored the human stories and, confronted the wider challenges facing American manufacturing.
Right.
But now with Tonawanda at a crossroads.
Yeah.
we got to look ahead.
Right. What's next?
Is there a path forward for this community?
Well, the road ahead, it's not going to be easy, but I do think there are reasons to be optimistic.
Okay, I like that.
The articles we talked about, they highlighted Tonowanda's really strong sense of community, their history of resilience, and their willingness to adapt to change. And those are all really powerful assets to have as they face this, difficult transition.
So let's dive into some potential paths to recovery.
Okay.
What are some concrete steps that can be taken to help those workers who lost their jobs find new opportunities?
Well, retraining and skills development are absolutely essential.
Yeah.
A lot of these workers have, valuable experience in manufacturing.
Right.
But they might need to learn new skills to be competitive in today's job market.
Yeah, the world's changing so fast.
It is.
And there's growing demand in fields like technology, healthcare, renewable energy.
Absolutely.
So how can Tonawanda bridge that gap between the skills of its workforce and, the needs of the future?
Well, that's where organizations like Workforce Buffalo are really stepping up.
Yeah, we talked about them.
Yeah, they're already working to connect workers with training programs
Okay.
and resources that are specifically designed for those growing industries.
That's great.
And the articles mention that local officials are pushing for more investment in these kinds of initiatives, which is a really positive sign.
Yeah, investing in the workforce is definitely a key piece of the puzzle here.
It is.
But what about attracting new businesses to Tonawanda?
Right.
How can they rebuild their economic base?
Well, Tonawanda has a lot to offer potential employers.
Oh, about what?
Well, they've got a skilled workforce, a strategic location,
right,
and as we've been discussing, a really strong community spirit.
Right.
These are all valuable assets that can be used to attract new investment.
And that sense of community, it shouldn't be underestimated. It can be really appealing to businesses that are looking to set up shop in a place where people genuinely care about their town.
Absolutely.
And support each other.
And that same spirit can help create a collaborative environment, where businesses, local government, and community organizations can all work together to build a stronger and more resilient local economy.
So we've talked about retraining programs, attracting new businesses, and harnessing that power of community. Are there any other kind of innovative ideas or initiatives being explored?
Well, one concept that's gaining some traction is the idea of worker-owned cooperatives.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about those.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. So imagine a scenario where the workers themselves actually take ownership of the factory and create a new business model where they have more control over their livelihoods and the profits stay within the community.
That's really cool. It aligns with, that growing movement towards a more democratic and equitable economy.
Exactly. It's about empowering workers and fostering a deeper sense of ownership.
Yeah, I like that.
It's a really exciting possibility that could lead to both economic sustainability and community empowerment.
It sounds like Tonawanda has a lot of options to consider.
They do.
From retraining programs and attracting new businesses to embracing these new models like worker-owned cooperatives.
Right.
And all while leveraging that incredible community spirit they've shown. It seems like they have the potential to not just rebuild, but to create something even better than what was lost.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
It's about using this challenge as an opportunity for transformation and growth.
Right.
To not just recover, but to really reimagine what the future of Tonawanda can be.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways you'd leave our listeners with?
Yeah.
What can we all learn from this whole experience?
Well, I think the most important lesson is to never underestimate the power of community.
Yeah.
The importance of lifelong learning and the potential for positive change, even when things are really tough.
And for anyone out there facing similar challenges, remember those Science of Getting Rich podcasts we mentioned?
Those are great. Yeah.
They offer some really valuable insights on turning setbacks into opportunities.
Yeah.
And finding creative solutions to problems that seem impossible.
Absolutely.
This Sumitomo closure, it's a stark reminder of how complex globalization is.
Yeah.
And the human cost of economic shifts. But it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
And our ability to innovate and renew.
I love that.
Well said. And on that note of hope and possibility, we come to the end of our deep dive into the story of Tonawanda.
Great discussion.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even a renewed sense of optimism.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in the power of human ingenuity to create a better future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.